All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's move on to the approval of this week's agenda.
We'll do roll call, please.
Roll call. You guys, that's probably a good thing to do.
Commissioner Cadwalder is absent tonight. Commissioner Carney? Here. Commissioner Gerard is absent. Commissioner Salcedo?
Here.
Commissioner Thielander?
Here.
And Chair Zanstra.
Here.
And then I just need an motion for the excuse of absences.
I'll make a motion to excuse Gerard and Caldwell.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, now let's move on to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? All right, it is passed. And I guess we can move on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Motion to pass?
I'll make a motion to pass.
Second?
I wasn't here.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? The motion passes. All right, I'd like to open it up to public comments and communications concerning items not on the agenda. Are there any? Can we get a motion to pass?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. I guess it's not a motion. All right, let's move on to old business. Let's start with the zoning changes for Grand Rapids gravel. And I think Andy has some stuff to talk about.
Yes, so with your packets that you got tonight, this wasn't something that was emailed out last week or sent out to you last week. It was something that came in today. There is a draft ordinance that has a date on the upper left-hand corner. Today's date, February 8th. And there are just a couple fairly minor adjustments to this ordinance that were made, and I want to go over those with you. At the last meeting, the commission asked that I get the input from the city attorney on this ordinance before we went forward and scheduled a public hearing. He did not have any suggestions with regard to changes to the floodplain overlay portion that we've been discussing. So sections 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 are all unchanged. Section 5, which starts about halfway down the 3rd page of the ordinance, which says Section 5 amendment of Section 1704C of Chapter 17. And then the section of the ordinance starts at that subsection C there. That is something that's new, and so what you're looking at here are these specific standards for earth removal and mineral extraction within the city. And he did have a couple of suggestions there for things that should be changed. So you'll see under item number 1, item C has been deleted, and it's been moved to a subsection 3, which is on the top of the next page. The reason why we did that is you'll see that under subsection 1, it says no soil, sand, gravel, or other earth material shall be removed from any land within the city without special land use approval with the following exceptions. And so the thinking here is that subsection C really permits pretty much anything as long as it doesn't alter predominant drainage patterns or cause drainage impacts on adjoining properties. So that really could be construed to allow a very large-scale operation without any sort of approval whatsoever, which is obviously not what we're interested in here. So by moving this item down into this new subsection 3 on the top of the next page, I think the intent is still there, and that we don't want some sort of mineral extraction operation to alter predominant drainage patterns or cause drainage impacts on adjacent properties. We've just moved that down, so that's actually the regulation itself. The other things that are highlighted there on that 4th page, items 2 through 11, for 3 to 11, those are all highlighted just because they were renumbered and nothing else has changed. Then on the top of the next page, item 12, that is new language. And what we're asking for there is some sort of general idea and a sort of a sketch plan format of what the applicant is thinking to do when the actual mining is complete. So what a lot of developers do when there's a mining operation is they'll mine it, or they'll dig a lake or something like that, and then they'll put the land back, and then after that they'll want to build houses or condos or whatever. And so in this case, we're asking them to tell us what their end use plan is. So we have a general idea of what they are thinking about long term. Noting that that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to ultimately approve that, but it's just that we want to know what they're going to do. And I think that is part of the overall consideration of the project, is what you're ultimately going to do with the property 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line. So that's why that's there. The other change to this ordinance is just section 6, amendment to the official zoning map, and that just refers to the map that is attached. And there are no significant changes to the map. There were just a couple of corrections that Betty Morlock and I worked on last week. But the map that is in front of you there reflects the zoning in the city as it is today, as accurate as we can possibly get it by going back and digging through all of the minutes and records from previous meetings for the last number of years to make sure that everything is zoned properly. So again, when this is done, we'll have a complete, perfectly accurate map that we can look at and refer to, and we'll print new ones for the city to hang up and everything. So at this point, those are the only changes to this particular ordinance. So at this point, the city can, you can hold a public hearing that has to be done by the Planning Commission before making a recommendation to City Council. So if you guys are all comfortable with this, you can schedule a hearing for the March meeting, or if you want to kind of think about it for a while, or if you have any questions, or if you want any clarification, we can of course, wait on it for a month and come back to it next month. So I'll leave it up to you, but Chairman Zanstra, I'll turn it back over to you, and if there are questions, let me know.
Great. Do we have any comments or any concerns about anything? That not much has been changed since we looked at this last, I don't think, other than some of the minor things he pointed out. I guess to start it off, I would be in favor of trying to get this moving a little bit faster and opening it for a public hearing in March.
They wanted to know by June, or wasn't it June, their date that they wanted to know?
Yeah, they didn't give us a hard date. They just said that,
This spring?
yeah, they being Grand Rapids Gravel, saying that they were thinking about, or
Yeah.
they were planning on a spring application. I don't know if spring means May or spring means March, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what's driving us a little bit.
I'd like to give them as much time as we can, not hold them up too much, unless you guys had some reason to stop.
I think it'd be a good idea to see what the public thinks about it.
The other thing I got is, so the floodplain is going to be replaced by the floodplain overlay district, so the map matches the wording.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, that was the major concern I had with this previously, is that the map did not match the words in the text. So now that it matches, that solves a pretty significant problem.
Any further discussion? Do we need a motion to move it to public? Well, do we have a motion to move to public hearing?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to move to a public hearing at the next meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries, and it'll be on next month's agenda. Moving on to 2016 goals and priorities. I'd like to open that up to discussion as well. Is that in this one?
Mm-hmm. Here's the first one.
Oh.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's open it up for discussion. I guess number one, the master plan is due for an update.
Actually, don't think you're due for a 5-year
5
update
years.
just
Okay.
yet. I think that's in,
I'm looking at
I
2015.
think that may be 2017, I think is the
Okay.
next 5-year.
Okay.
It was done when I was still the manager.
Right. Well, there was a I think the plan was adopted in 2007, and I believe there was a review done in 2012, I want to say. So I think the next 5-year update would be 2017. That doesn't mean that you can't update it before that if you want to, but it's not required by the act.
Okay. All right, moving on to the review maximum building height.
Didn't we just do that last?
Oh, I'm looking at 2015. What is considered to be a hard surface? Yes. Not sure what we're.
Well, what we discussed of that, whether it would be paved or there would be crushed asphalt, crushed stone would be approved for parking surfaces at that time. And we thought we'd bring it at least to the agenda for 2016 and see what direction we want to go. If that's one of our 3 top things we really wanted to achieve this year in the planning. So there was some talk about that.
Yeah.
And then I think they were looking at bringing in maybe somebody that could tell us exactly what those hard surfaces are.
Yep.
And maybe look at longevity, how long will they last, cost effective, things like that part of it. So that's what I recall.
Yeah. Am I missing anything?
Andy, is that something you would look at doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, the background of the conversation was that in the section of the ordinance that deals with parking and construction of parking lots, it says it has to be paved with asphalt, concrete, or some other hard surface. And so the question, I guess, is, well, what does that mean? I mean, is it, like you said, is crushed asphalt considered a hard surface? I don't know. But, you know, the question is things evolve and, you know, techniques and different things are financially viable. We get requests sometimes for people that don't want to go through the expense of paving a large parking surface or a small parking surface, but they want to do something that's more cost effective, like crushed asphalt. Or some other, you know, porous pavement or some other sort of surface that's maybe not technically concrete or asphalt, rolled asphalt. And so, yeah, one of the questions that came out of that conversation, right, Kelly, we talked about that, you know, maybe 6 months ago or so. As far as what that meant, should we consider alternative surfaces, I guess, for parking lots, for city-owned lots, for businesses, and things like that. Some of the other stuff on the list, I know we did talk about building height a little bit. Items 3 through 8 we didn't get into too much, I don't think, last year. So I think moving forward, just for purposes of discussion, if there's anything in there that is of particular concern or interest to you guys, it might be worth talking about. I can give you a little bit of background with some of these, but not all of them, because I don't know what some of the thinking is behind them. I know item 5, where it talks about lot coverage standards, for example. In the C3 district, it says that I think your maximum lot coverage is like 60%. Which sounds okay, but when we did the gas station several years ago, the new one down on the corner, I mean, between the building and the parking and the pumps and the car wash and everything, like 90% of the lot itself is covered because they consider the parking lot to be part of that lot coverage calculation. And so with that provision in there, there's a ton of properties that, because they have a parking lot that is paved, they can't meet the standards of the ordinance. So that was something that was, you know, that we've highlighted sometimes as being kind of awkward to work with, and the ordinance is kind of ambiguous as to what the intent of it is or what it's supposed to be regulating or things like that. Under number 6, accessory dwelling, so that's like a guest house or a granny flat, if you will. In a lot of cities, historically, there was a dwelling unit, a living space above like a garage or something like that, located on the same parcel. as a single-family residence. Over the years, that's gone away in a lot of communities, including Lowell. So now you can have one dwelling on a lot, so you can't have a second small dwelling or an in-law or whatever. And there has been a few requests for things like that over the years as well. So again, that's something that maybe think about modifying that policy, and that we would make ordinance amendments to deal with that if you were so inclined. Number 7, requirements for parking spaces, possible thoughts. So we do formula based on area populations. The idea behind that one, I think, is that generally with parking, it's all sort of done on a use-by-use basis. So you look at this parcel, this use requires this many spaces based on all of these traffic studies that have been done. And so then the city then comes up with a standard that says thou shalt provide one parking space per 300 square feet or 500 square feet or something like that. So this contemplates maybe a new way of doing that, because there was a parking study that was recently conducted for the DDA. And so the thinking is that maybe there's a different formula, specifically I think for the downtown, where maybe we think about having a different way to calculate what the parking requirements should be for building based upon, how many people are, live there, or how many spaces are, demanded by uses within a certain radius or something like that. It's maybe a little bit different from that parcel by parcel approach that has gone on.
Can we also talk about kind of time usage, like during the daytime it might be less than maybe evening and dinner rush hours? Can we have some conversations on those as well too?
Yeah, when we talked about that, the thinking is that if it's one building and you occupy the same building, let's say there's a restaurant on the ground floor, and then above that there are offices or something. The offices are generally going to be occupied from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or something like that, Monday through Friday. The restaurant is going to primarily be busy mostly on evenings and weekends when there's not people in the office. And so the thinking is, typically what you do is, or what a lot of ordinances require, is that you just take the parking required for the offices, you add it to the parking required for the restaurant, and then that's how much parking you need. And then of course you end up with a lot of parking that's never used because no one is actually actively occupying all of that stuff all at the same time, because the nature of the uses, there's an overlap there. So in a lot of cases where there are mixed uses like that, you can allow for a reduction by some percentage, maybe in the amount of required parking. We did an ordinance like this a while back, and I think we allowed for a 40% reduction in parking if there was an overlapping mixed use sort of thing. And that's something that it doesn't have to be required to be 40%, but it's something that if the applicant says, look, I don't need this much parking, the planning commission can take all that information into consideration. We can do the research, look at the specific uses, and see if that kind of reduction makes sense or not.
The new formula based on area population, has that been done other places?
Probably. I haven't done it personally. I don't know exactly what the formula was that he was thinking about. I know the parking study that will be presented at the DDA here in a few weeks, I think. I don't know if it gets into that, but we did a very long, detailed analysis and counting every parking space and seeing what's required by the ordinance, and to sort of determine once and for all, is there really a parking shortage in Lowell? Yes or no? And if so, how do we deal with it? How do we, if there is, how do we deal with it in zoning? How do we make sure that as we grow, we're allowing for additional parking, but not letting it dominate the landscape and those kinds of things? So there are a lot of different techniques out there that have been used. Some areas have put an overall cap on the number of spaces you can have in an area. Others have an approach where you have every use, instead of having a minimum parking requirement, you put a maximum in there instead. So it's trying to encourage more mixed uses, more walking, less trips from store to store to store to store. And that was something that would primarily be done downtown, where it's a more walkable environment. You wouldn't do this out, west of downtown on Main Street somewhere. So there's a lot of different techniques that we could look at. Area populations would be one thing that we could look at, but I don't know that it's the only appropriate method. We might find over time that there's a different way to do it, but we'd have to see what that is based on you know, some of the new trends that are emerging and things like that. And then number 8, the comprehensive review of the ordinance would be exactly that, a comprehensive, more or less cover-to-cover rewrite of the entire zoning ordinance, which we can certainly do. Would take, I mean, that would be a long, you know, year and a half type of process, and it would be a major, you know, cover-to-cover rewrite of every provision in the ordinance. Not necessarily changing everything, but reviewing everything at least, and if something needed to be changed, we changed it. And kind of going through page by page, chapter by chapter, one chapter at a time over a period of a number of months and getting through the whole thing.
How often is that done? So what's the standard for reviewing an ordinance?
Like a comprehensive rewrite? It varies. Typically not very often. I mean, we're working on one right now that hasn't been comprehensively rewritten since like 1945 or something.
When's the last time we did ours? You know?
This one was in the 80s, I think. So, or 91. You're due, in my opinion.
Yeah, we codified all the code of ordinances besides the zoning ordinance. So that was done in the late 80s.
Are there some that...
Also, you're going to need to have, you know, the city attorney involved.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a long...
Are there some that stick out more than others that really need to be looked at?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain sections that concern me. This floodplain thing was honestly one of them that was right on the top of my list for a while, so I'm glad we're taking care of that. But yeah, there are some others that we could definitely take a look at, and if you're interested in that, I can come up with some ideas for maybe things that I'm concerned about or that we come into.
Top 5, kind of?
Yeah, that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and if, you know, maybe there's not the appetite right now to go through a large, you know, 15 to 18-month process, maybe we can, like we did with the, when Brian was here and we worked on the sign chapter, you guys did that for a number of months. Maybe we could do something like that and pick a chapter or a section and give that some real thought to. If that was a concern, we could certainly do that as well.
Yeah, I'd be interested in like a top 5 concerning parts of the ordinance rather than going through the
Second one, but I think eventually we still need to look at that. I mean, if it's been since 1980, maybe some are just a quick brief. We don't have to touch them.
Yeah, I'm open to that.
Are there standards that the state or other communities use to help them in these processes that could help us?
I mean, there are a lot of what we have to make sure that we're keeping track of is that we're not doing anything that's prohibited or regulated otherwise by the state. For example, the state dictates how you deal with home occupations, you know, family daycares, family adult daycares, family foster cares, minor sort of minor home occupations like, you know, someone teaching piano lessons or you know, dancing or something like that at a house. There are certain things like that that you can't regulate, you can't touch. I mean, mining is one of them, to be honest with you. This mineral extraction has been heavily litigated and regulated by the state. It's not regulated that much, but there is specific language in there. The part about telecommunication facilities that we just amended recently, that's something that the state gets its hands in a little bit as far as how we regulate it. So there are general guidelines that tell us how we have to do things, like how we notice for public hearings and how we have to mail out the letters to everyone who within 300 feet of a certain area when there's a rezoning or something. All that is set by the state. And we have to do that whether it's in the ordinance or not, but it's helpful to put it in the ordinance as the state does it so there's not any confusion as to why we're not following the ordinance if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead. You know, we've done dozens of these over the years, so we have kind of our own format that we like. And it's not, structurally, it's not terribly different from what you have now, but a lot of the language would be clarified, expanded where necessary, just kind of cleaned up, make it a bit easier understand, easy to work with. We could look at some more form-based concepts like we did in the mixed-use district where that makes sense and things like that too.
Yeah, I would think maybe a review of everything and then get more comprehensive on some of the troubled areas rather than spend, you know, a lot of time on everything. You know, just not knowing exactly how, you know, like you said, there was one city that did it in the 40s and now we're doing it again. And I don't want to do it too soon if we just did it and it's still good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the 40s is kind of an extreme case. I mean, most of them that we redo are from the 80s or 90s, so we were kind of at that age. What we can do then, and again, we do this a lot, is we can write an audit of the whole thing. So we go through chapter by chapter, page by page, and highlight deficiencies, basically. Things that need to be reworked, things that maybe they're problem areas, and then from there, we can decide which pieces are maybe the most alarming or the most challenging that we need to work on. And then if you don't want to go through a whole rewrite, we can sort of work on those few key sections and move forward from there. If that's something that you'd be comfortable with, we can do that.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and 5 and 6 are also kind of interest. 5, 6, and 7 are of interest to me, of all of them. The ones that you mainly highlighted, you know, appropriate to take a more look at. Do we have any more discussion on that? All right, do we want to have a motion to close and move on?
There's no motion.
No motion.
No motion. Okay. All right, well, let's move on to new business then. The new Union Brewery site plan and special land use review. Open that up to discussion.
Excited.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
are
need
you
a
okay with
brewery.
that?
Yeah, so there was an application submitted by Tyler Melting, who is
Great name, right?
And and so this, since when we passed the amendment to the ordinance a while back for breweries to be especially used in C3, was to accommodate something like this. And so because it is a special use, there's a public hearing involved. So I guess my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, is we'll let the applicant come up and sort of present his plans. And then after that, of course, you guys can ask all the questions of him you want. And then I can review my report, and then we can take comments from the public if there are any. And then after the hearing, there can be a motion to approve or table or.
Okay, great. Let's start that up. Come on up.
Good evening. Thank you for having me out here, and it's been a pleasure working with the city so far, with Sue and with Andy. They've been very helpful just working through this process, and you know, it's a long process, and it's good to have somebody that you can work with on it, so I do appreciate that. As you know, we were looking at the building over at 400 West Main, and looking at kind of fixing that corner up a little bit as best we can, make it look a little more presentable, get something going in there. And you know, I drive by it every day. I've been doing it for a long time, and I think, you know, it was nice to have the opportunity to be able to do something. So that's kind of, and something locally, kind of something in the community that I'm part of, and so that's kind of was our game plan from that. So with that said, we are looking at putting in a microbrewery to do contract brewing, and then to have a tasting room, you know, for the public to be able to come and try different beers or fill up a growler and that kind of thing. So, you know, I don't know exactly what all you're interested in knowing on it, but so I guess I can answer any questions you might have.
Is this your first time operating a brewery or anything like that?
We went through the application process, the same process in the city of Grand Rapids. The location that we had just wasn't the best, and we went through the application process. We got approved through the city of Grand Rapids, and you know, when we started doing the kind of looking at the location of exactly where we're going to be, it wasn't as ideal as this one that came up, and so we decided to change it and come out here. And I think it was a fortunate opportunity for us. So we did go through the process. We've been doing this for quite a while, probably 3 years that we've been doing the research on it, doing the applications and so on for it. So, but yes, this would be the first time opening an actual brewery.
I had a small concern, and that was the number of parking spaces as we look at improving that corner for a right turn lane. Have you gotten to talk to the parcel next door, whether or not you'll be able to use it as an overflow?
We did, and I understand that concern too, because it affects our business as well, you know. We want people to stop in, and we want to make sure they have adequate area. I wouldn't say there is not an opportunity next door, but to do like a permanent type easement situation would be very difficult with him, because then it would restrict the property owner from doing things in the future. And I don't know what his plans are, but it would just put a restriction on there, especially if it's a long-term situation where people become accustomed to that and then having to change it up. Then it's like, now what do you do? So, I mean, our goal is to grow as well too. So I don't know if there isn't something that we can figure out long-term, you know, later on. We were talking to him, and it sounded like he was open to the idea. He didn't put anything down in writing yet, but just to allow the employees only during business hours to be able to park off-site or, you know, on the adjacent property, to free up two more spots, you know, in there. And then we were also looking at, you know, how can we figure this out? You know, I looked around the city down on Main Street, and you know, most of the businesses, restaurants, shops are within 100 to 300 foot of a public parking area. There's actually 2 within that same amount of space from the brewery there. They have that spot right behind the Shell station, which I think has 30 to 35 parking spots, and I think that's about 270 feet away. And then also the public museum, yeah, the hours are kind of offset from when we're looking to be open anyway. I think they close at 4 o'clock, and we wouldn't be looking to even be open till 3, 4 o'clock anyway. So, you know, and I don't know what rules or restriction on that, but I mean, we were thinking of coming up with a signage or something to say, hey, this is where the additional overflow parking spots could be with the public lots that are already available. So that was kind of our thoughts on that. Because I do understand, and I think it would be something too that we would continue to try to work with the adjacent owner on figuring something out, but I wouldn't want to make any promises or anything with what his decision is.
So do you have to uphold for a C3? Is that the liquor license? What do you got to get? None?
No. With a microbrewer's license, it's actually more difficult than getting a liquor license, because it has to be approved by the TTB, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. It's like applying for a new liquor license, but they do a little bit more thorough investigation, and they do the background checks. They do, you know, your procedure. You got to get signed off by the agricultural department because you're actually making something. So instead of actually a liquor license, you're getting the microbrewer's license.
Okay.
So it only allows you to serve what you make in there. So we couldn't serve, you know, name brand products, you know, liquors, alcohols, wine or beer. It's just what we're creating there.
Are you planning to utilize the grain elevator?
No, that's actually a separate parcel.
Oh.
We are only the parcel on the very corner there. There's a separate parcel with a grain elevator in the big building there. Again, I mean, I think we want to work with the owner, because the same owner owns both. But he's not the most, he's difficult to work a little bit on that. So, I mean, it's just long term. I think, you know, our goal is to try to, you know, show what we can do here and see if there's an opportunity down the road to you know, help fix the whole corner.
So go ahead.
So eventually you may end up...
You know, it's just, it really all depends, you know. And I haven't even talked to him about it really yet, too. It's just, you know, It'd be something, you know, if you're growing, be kind of natural. Right?
Be
So,
nice to see that.
yes.
Yeah, so the silos aren't gonna be yours, the grain elevator, you're just this section, right?
Just a section right up on the very front there. Yeah.
How many people do you plan on having?
I think it just depends on the occupancy. We're currently doing the interior drawings. We're kind of waiting on this meeting here to kind of, for the build out and that kind of stuff, to make sure it was something that the city is open to do, get that approval before we put a lot of money into doing the build out section of it. So, you know, the interior, I don't know what the title is, but the engineer will tell us what the occupancy is for the size. That's not brewery area, bathrooms, or whatever else, so.
Will it be a stand-up type of a situation where they come in and they taste the wines, like at a winery, is that type of a situation?
There would be probably 4 or 5 tables,
Okay.
I think, in there. And just a couple kind of community tables and then a couple taller tables with like a bar area as well, is kind of what we were thinking. It's not a huge area in there, but we want to make it comfortable where you could, you know, have a seat too.
There was a question that was raised by a public works employee about any discharge of the alcohol into the sanitary sewer system. Would you be looking at doing that, or what would you be doing in terms of?
It's a pretty small system. I mean, at one batch would be, I think, 130 gallons. So, and you're not really doing it very often. You know, you're probably only brewing 1 to 2 times a week. So the amount of any discharge would be relatively small. At that point, it's not alcohol either. It's got to ferment, and you know, while you're making it, I guess there's a chance where something went bad with the fermentation or something like that. That could be an issue, but
Yeah, I would just recommend that, you know, that you touch base with
sure,
the public works and just see if there's any concerns.
that's a good.
Just to make sure.
That's a good idea. You know, we went to Cascade Township because the building permits and kind of spoke with them already on it, and you know, didn't perceive any issues.
This may not be an issue either, but
Yeah.
just to play safe.
Sure, I understand. And there's not too many improvements that we're doing to the building. That's the other nice thing about the location, is that it's kind of, the shell and all that is all set up kind of for it. So there's not tons of stuff that we need to do inside. So.
All right, I'm not sure I have any other questions either. I guess we can move to public comments.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Are there any public comments? All right, that'll work. All right, are there any other new pieces of business we need to talk about?
I did prepare a report for you guys dated January 22nd. That should be in your packets. It's a memorandum a few pages long that reviews all of the site plan and special land use criteria that we need to be thinking about here. I don't have a lot of concerns with regard to the site plan. Recognize that this is a non-conforming lot, I believe, because of its small width and area. And that's fine. The ordinance allows someone to use and develop a non-conforming lot.
When that building was originally built, there were several variances that were granted at that time.
Okay.
It was a number of years ago. But,
Okay. So, that, in this case, it doesn't really affect anything, although only in the sense that if he were to want to expand, he couldn't expand in some way that would make it more non-conforming than it already is. There is no landscaping proposed, although the MDOT drawing shows that they're going to replace some of the landscaping there when they improve the right turn lane there from, that would be eastbound Main onto southbound Hudson Street. So there'd be a little bit of landscaping there. They're not proposing any additional lighting. Parking seems to be the only real concern here, and we'll get to that in a minute. You know, he has provided a number of, I think, 9 spots or so. And the ordinance doesn't require, for this use, the ordinance doesn't require a specific minimum number of uses like it often does. And then within the zoning ordinance, moving on to the special land use section 17.03A, it lists 4 standards that the Planning Commission must find are met before you approve any proposed special land use. So 1 through 4 are those standards, and so the proposed use shall be designed, constructed, and operated and maintained so that to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that it will not change the character of the area. And again, we're looking at no significant exterior alterations. It pretty comfortably fits, I think, within the general character of the C3 district, where you're looking at retail and service, commercial type uses, and I think this fits in quite nicely with that. Number 2 talks about being served adequately by essential public facilities such as highway, streets, police, fire, drainage, and so forth. And again, I think it meets all of those standards. It's quite well located right in the middle of town. There's 2 driveways. There are utilities present on the site. Obviously, the roads are plenty, so I don't have any significant concerns there. Under item 3, it talks about creating excessive additional requirements at public cost for public facilities and services. And again, given the fairly small scale nature of the use at this time, I don't foresee any major concerns there. And the last one talks about the proposed use shall not involve uses, activities, processes, materials, and equipment or conditions of operation that would be detrimental to persons' property or the general welfare by reason of excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, fumes, glare, or odors. The only one that jumped out to me a bit there are odors. I mean, the brewing process, fermentation creates odors. I think that's pretty fair to say. But at the same time, there is a provision in the ordinance that deals with that we added, and the actual brewing process within this building is going to be kind of on the south and mostly southeast part of the building, which is generally as much away from any residential properties as you can be. And that's really the only potential thing that could come up. Not everyone likes that particular smell. I personally do, but not everybody does. But I think 200 feet gives it I think some significant. There's enough distance there that I think that'll be handled. And plus, again, this is not a huge scale operation where there's going to be thousands and thousands of gallons of beer being. And those specific standards that we added to the ordinance to deal with the winery/brewery is in 1704 subsection DD. And on the bottom of the second page and starting on the third page are those 6 standards. And so again, there's an isolation radius, if you will, of 200 feet between the building and an adjacent residentially zoned property, which they meet. Again, design the site and operate it to minimize potential negative impacts. Demonstrate that trucks and delivery vehicles will be provided with adequate maneuvering areas on the lot. There are 2 delivery areas. One's on the east side of the building and the other is on the west, sort of in the rear of the building. As you see, there's the loading and unloading areas shown on the site plan there. If you're so inclined, you can establish hours of operation for it, and then maintain all applicable federal, state, and local permits upon request, furnish copies to the city. And the last one is demonstrate that adequate parking loaded areas are provided on site. So if you're comfortable with the parking and sort of circulation layout they have here, given the fairly constrained nature of the site, you can approve it. On the last page here, under recommendation, there's the 7 recommended conditions. I would think that because the owner of the adjacent property doesn't want to do a permanent instrument like an easement or something to dedicate the parking, to the applicant. I think that, that particular condition, we can maybe modify it, and instead of saying that, some sort of written agreement shall be provided to the city, maybe we still ask for something in writing, but maybe it's not permanent. Maybe we ask for, I have jotted down here, the applicant shall submit a letter from adjacent property owner authorizing the use of the parking area to the west of the brewery for employees or something like that. So we can modify that condition if you're comfortable with it. If you want to set hours of operation, again, you can, you don't have to. But if you don't, maybe sometimes planning commissions don't want things going on, too late at night or whatever. So if you're so inclined, you may do that, although you don't have to. And so if you're inclined to approve it, I would suggest incorporating those 7 conditions or so, or 6 depending on what you do. And the motion to approve should incorporate the standards that are in the zoning ordinance, and you can refer to my memo for justification for your approval.
What do you guys think of number 5? I think that might be the only one that I don't necessarily feel like we need to set. Hours of operation.
I prefer to stay out of their way.
Yeah.
It says we may, but I had no intention of setting hours.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
From a standpoint of distribution, when do you see if you're going to take it to downtown Grand? What is your operations of those deliveries going in and out?
Sure, that would be during, morning type of situation. We would be completely done and not doing anything if we were open for public hours. And tentatively, we're only looking at being open in the afternoon time, evening time anyway, consistent with a lot of the other restaurants in the area, so.
Well, I know someday you hope you send it out by the semi-loads, but maybe they'll do just small delivery trucks to start with?
Yeah,
Okay.
it would just be small self-distributing to just several key accounts type of thing.
All right. How about the other 5? 8 is any more that we want to add? Do you guys have anything we should be adding to that?
The only thing that I'll say is people will park wherever they want to, and I hope it doesn't become a hassle for you if it is an overflow and conflict happens between you and the other parcel owners, and you guys can work it out without a lot of hassle.
That's why I think something might naturally happen.
Is there any issue with having parking across the street? Is there anything where that could be an issue where, they park across the intersection and they have to walk across, or that shouldn't be?
There's no crosswalk.
What's that?
It's signal.
Yeah, it's signal light.
Signal light
They got.
tells you when to walk, when not to.
Yeah, it's right there. Okay, so no additions. Do we have any motions?
I'll make a motion, we move forward to accepting the proposal.
With the suggested conditions other than 5?
Yes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All opposed? All right, the motion carries.
Good luck, gentlemen.
All right, we can move on to staff reports.
I have nothing to report.
All right, do we have any commission remarks?
I do.
Okay.
I am going to have to resign. I have a wedding coming up in 4 months, and I got a big promotion at work, and I just don't have the time to dedicate to the commission that it needs. And I've really enjoyed working with you guys, and maybe after my wedding, I will be able to rejoin you guys, but right now it's just too much.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
Thanks. Great guy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, good.
All right, well, if there are no other remarks, Are there any motions to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
All opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 7:50.